Okay, Kathy. Tell me how. First of all, let's start with the gorging.
Okay.
How'd you feel about that?
It was hard. It was really hard to do. It's force feeding.
Yeah, how often do you actually do that without having an emotional justification? Because the times you've force fed before, it's for an emotional gratification. So there's always a reasoning behind it that makes you feel better about it.
It's sickening to continue to eat. It did not. It felt disgusting.
Did you get a hot flash? Any hot problems or acid reflux?
Not quite.
Okay.
No, just as a matter of fact, I didn't even, it was, I don't know how to describe it, but mostly that, like, I didn't feel I just felt like it was it was what I was supposed to do, just keep piling it in, but I never felt like really full, just the way.
Just icky?
Yeah, just icky. Just eating that much all the time was gross.
Yeah.
I didn't want anybody to know I was doing it. I was kind of keeping it hidden from my husband, even though he knew I needed to do that. And he was like, I just can't watch.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to find all the fat foods, so bacon and, just about everything I can think of to gorge. So I think I was pretty successful at doing it.
Awesome. Well, you'd know now. You would know because you would have been starving this entire time.
Yeah. Okay.
Like unmanageable.
Okay.
So if you've been feeling like the 500 calorie, Dr. Simeon's protocol has been adequate, you did a great job.
Okay.
So let's go with that. I mean, how has you've been on this now for 10 full, very low calorie days.
Yep.
And overall, based on the hunger scale, would you say that your hunger is manageable?
Yes. I have been like right around, typically I feel like I'm right around 5 all the time.
Mm-hmm. Nothingness. 5 is a nothing.
Yeah.
You could eat, but you don't really have the urge and it's not necessary.
Yeah. Until like the last couple of days. Now I'm starting, yesterday I ate a little bit extra protein.
Okay, good.
And finally felt satisfied. So, but the last couple of days I've been pretty hungry.
You want to make sure you don't let yourself get too hungry.
Okay.
Because a lot of times if you wait until you get ravenously hungry, it's like it's hard to catch up.
Okay.
And you are lean. I mean, you are, 23%-ish, so body fat. So you're getting to where, that first round of fat cells that we depleted were probably the bigger ones.
Okay.
That's the visceral fat. You lost over 7 inches, and most of which came from your abdomen.
Okay.
So that visceral fat, that's your body's utilizing that fuel. So you don't, at this point, and what I've noticed with many people is hunger comes in stair steps. When you lose those larger fat cells, there's hunger may abruptly shift a little bit, and you need to be accommodating it.
Okay.
The other thing is your menstrual cycle. Where are you?
Saturday it started.
Okay, so you may notice Saturday. Mm-hmm. You should notice that your hunger, so the last few days, your hunger should be diminishing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's starting, actually, like I said, yesterday was the first day where I actually felt like I could satisfy that hunger.
Yeah.
And so I think I'm kind of coming back now from that. From all
Good.
Of that.
So overall, how has the emotional ride been?
Well, there's been some really tough times. Not like the first few days, but when my menstrual cycle started, there's always been overeating associated with that, and at least a 5-pound weight gain. Mm-hmm. And so it's mixed emotions because I've lost weight, number one, so that feels good. But there's something inside me, even though I'm not hungry, that says you should eat that ice cream, or you should eat those cookies, or you should have that.
You think that's just
sweet.
Your habit, brain,
my habit.
Your habit of thinking?
Yes.
And so what did it feel like to just not do it? I mean, did you feel punished or deprived?
No, I felt, I really don't want to do that anymore, so I felt conflicted there's that internal battle.
Mm-hmm. But if you truly don't want to do it anymore, you're not willing to, all the justifications, you're more willing to just say, no, I'm not going to do it. Right. It is the battle. Yeah. But the thing is this, if you have a desire to not do it, it will always win. The desire is what's so important. When people go into this and they don't necessarily have a desire, they just like the idea of it. Mm-hmm. Usually they struggle. Yeah. A lot more for a longer period of time. Yeah. So when the desire is already established, the learning curve is much faster. Yeah. Does that make sense? Yeah. So doesn't mean that the struggle isn't there. Right. It just means that you're willing to be okay with the struggle. You're not judging the struggle as much, and you will notice that the struggle isn't as often. Right. Eventually it just dissipates because once you do it one time, especially with certain triggers, the next time it's not as trying. And then eventually you just don't even notice it because the trigger doesn't exist anymore. Right. We're rewiring the brain is what we're doing.
Yeah. And I can see that happening, especially like with the hunger that I've experienced in the last couple of days. Mm-hmm. I think that's the hardest part for me is identifying when I am truly hungry, and I think I'm starting to figure that out. Mm-hmm. And I think I'm starting to figure out when I'm satisfied, because after I was satisfied yesterday, then that struggle went away. Mm-hmm. Then it was, then it wasn't, I wasn't hungry, there was no emotional connection to food after I became satisfied.
You know what? How much of your fear of eating or the judgment of eating is because before you didn't realize you were hungry? I mean, did you just constantly feel guilty every time you ate? Yes. That is such an eating disorder. Yes. I mean, and I'm not judging that because I've so been there because you're so fearful of fat gain and your need for control to compensate for vulnerability. It's like we judge hunger. Yeah. Which is why it's like I was this way when I was mentally ill to the extreme. Okay. I would judge all hunger. And every time I was hungry, I would be angry and think it was my lack of self-control. Yes. Which is so punishing to the human body. Yep. It's like and judging.
When I would give in to that,
you would binge.
I can't do it. I might as well eat everything in sight.
Because you suck and your body's there must be something wrong with your body because you're hungry. And you don't identify it as hunger. Yeah. I know. It's really... I
should be able to not eat this. I should be able to lose weight.
I know.
So, all of that. So I'm really kind of coming to terms with that, I think is...
that when you're hungry, you should eat?
Yes.
It's kind of funny how that works. Yeah. I know. It is one of those things people say to me, well, should I be taking Ventramine so I'm not hungry? I'm like, hunger is so valuable. Yeah. It's such an important message that your brain is sending you, and it's not something to be feared. It really isn't. Now, obviously, extreme hungers, allowing extreme famine isn't okay, because to me that's just as bad as binging. Allowing your body to feel and to go through starvation for ego, for control reasons, is just as detrimental.
Well, and I've had some thoughts around that too. Like when I first started doing this and I wasn't hungry at all, I felt victory in the fact that I could not eat.
That's the anorexia side. Yeah. That's what anorexics feel like. In fact, I remember feeling such power when I would withstand hunger. Yes. I honestly felt I loved that feeling of being super empty, and it drove kind of the ego involved with the emotional idea that hunger and being able to feel hunger gives me value. Yeah. That is so fake. Yeah. So I'm glad you recognize that happening.
Yeah. It's been tough. There's been the emotion I'm experiencing right now is some sadness, some letting go. Loneliness. I've been lonely too, like this past week. Just kind of letting go of all of that.
Yeah, and it does feel lonely, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, and because a lot of your activity was to fulfill kind of that, it's fulfilling that false sense of value based on whatever you were doing. And when that's gone, then you're being held responsible emotionally to find value without it. So it's a test of your creativity from within. Like, it's a real test of what's true, not fake anymore.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yes,
and so
I
you
do.
have to really not only allow yourself to have that isolation, but to want it so that because that is the path you're going to need to go through.
Yeah.
To find that, that soul that I don't think you've ever truly paid attention to.
Yeah.
Yeah. It requires you don't judge it. You don't have some like expectation or some ideology of what you were doing. This is probably the step before true submission, which is truly letting go of the false identity, the false ego or alter ego, letting that go. Because you want to find, this is the desire part, you want to find who you are, that no one can define. What is that? Who is that person? Yeah. And then once you find that girl, once you find that spirit, then you develop from there. That's like starting over. But it's from a place of truth. What's authentic? Who are you really? And then if you find that and really put value to that, nothing can give to it. Does that make sense? You could win. You could gain all levels of attainment based on society. You could gain money, you could gain fame, you could gain like, oh my God, you're the expert. And it doesn't give to who you think you are.
Right.
It doesn't change it at all, which means it could all come and go and you're not vulnerable to losing it. If your sense of self is developed on something fake, such as I make more money, I attained all this education, I'm now an expert, or I have this type of car, or all these people like me, right?
Right.
Then if they don't like you, if you don't get the car, if you lose the job, then that shouldn't really influence your sense of worth.
Right.
I repeated that a couple times, I know I get repetitious, but I think that it's really important that you understand that true self-worth comes from nothing. It comes from something that's intrinsic inside, and it is from the soul. If you create that foundation, everything you do will be from a higher state of consciousness. Because you're not manipulating the situation to feel better about yourself. Because you already feel good about yourself.
Yeah.
So then you're actually doing things to magnify who you are, not to define who you are.
Yeah, that all makes sense to me. And it's good to hear it verbalized, because I'm like, what the hell am I doing?
I know it, and it's because there is no like step-by-step pattern to this. All it is really going inside.
Yeah.
And, one of the things that I did for myself was I remember going back into my childhood and trying to find a glimpse of when I felt, who I was. And I wrote about this in the book. It's like me playing with those G.I. Joes out in the yard. I mean, it had to have been this very short period of time that I remember. And that's the one thing I focused in on. Like that little girl playing outside when I was like 4 years old.
Yeah.
I still feel like her. And that's, I really held on to that because I couldn't understand anything outside of that. It was a nightmare outside of that sense.
Right.
And that once I attached to that feeling, I really focused on it because I thought, I just want to be that again. And if I can hold on to that sense, which I could still feel, and let go of everything around me, then that would be my start, my do-over point.
Got it.
I was like 4 years old when I started over. My body age was 19. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yep.
But emotionally and my spirit, I was back to that 4-year-old person. And when I really fell in love with that little girl was when instantly my levels of consciousness just blew up. I remember after that moment where I really kind of fell for that soul, I just fell in love with it. Mm-hmm. I remember walking around campus and seeing people. It was the most bizarre feeling. I remember people that 2 hours earlier I would have judged because they had piercings and were obviously struggling to identify with who they were.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, that was mine.
Was that yours? I'm going to make sure mine's turned off. I remember feeling just how incredibly powerful they were. I remember actually feeling like, holy shit, these people have no idea how powerful they are, how amazing they are. And I actually felt unconditional love for complete strangers. I didn't even talk to them, you know, and it's not only that, but I also could feel the trees. How freaking bizarre is that? Like, I remember thinking, oh my God, these trees are alive. I can feel all the energy there. It was insane. Mm-hmm. I don't know, I'm pretty sure I told you all this before. I don't know, I always repeat myself, so. I was there for a good 2 years.
Okay.
And I always, I think when you have kids and, when life occurs, sometimes you lose that, level on but there's times I get back to it and there's times it goes away, but there is, my foundation of my worth will never change. I think once you become aware of what your soul is capable of without conformity, you won't go back. It's very difficult to go back. Yeah. And to lose that.
Difficult to find it too.
Because you have to let go of all forms of conformity. I mean, think of it this way. If we were to take you right now and throw you into an entirely different country with totally different ideals, what do? Who are you now? Mm-hmm. Do you try to change who you are to acclimate to their ideology? Do you adjust so that you can, but do you attach your identity to it? The thing is, like, if I was an anthropologist, God, that's what I think I am. I'm a spiritual anthropologist. I want to know you. I want to get to understand you, and there's no judgment to it. Mm-hmm. It doesn't define who I am anymore. Yeah. Like it used to. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, I think I'm the person that would try to acclimate, figure it out.
As long as you don't
through fear.
The goal would be that you don't judge.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Think of it like a massive web of consciousness. Mm-hmm. When you look at statistically, when you have just like 4 numbers, how many numbers can be created, or routes can be created through 4? Right. Like, it's almost uncomputable. Right. It's computatable, but there's a massive amount of variance. So if you think of consciousness as a big web, some people think that we should all have the same exact location on the web. Mm-hmm. But in reality, the web is undefinable, because you could create any form of consciousness from that web. Yeah. It's like a matrix. And what I'm saying is, you thought it was this little tiny circle or box. Yeah. And I'm saying, hey, let go of that box and let's just look at this huge web. So anybody you meet and come to, is what they are doing on that web, is that what you should be doing?
Not necessarily.
So then being able to adjust and adapt and to change and to move and to understand that there's a web. There is nothing that is perfect. It's completely dynamic and evolutionary, and it's evolving at all times. Mm-hmm. That totally changes things, doesn't it? Yeah. How can you judge someone based on that awareness? How do you then honestly, what's good and bad at that point? Yeah. It's obviously relative to whatever ideology they're using. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? So what we're trying to get you to do is say, okay, who are you, and why have you defined your value based on some random... Yeah. So we're trying to say, hey, you're not that anymore. Well, let's get back to what was original. Mm-hmm. And that original state is basically capable of anything on that web of consciousness. Mm-hmm. Am I making any sense?
Yes.
Okay.
You are.
Okay.
You are. I'm just digging for how it fits in for me, and how can I get there? Because I think, like, with everything that we do in life, we create a mindset about how we're going to react to certain things. It becomes automatic.
Totally.
And
you've trained it.
Yep.
And it's the certain things that are for most people, are they based on acceptance and unconditional love, or are they usually based on fear of rejection and fear of what's...
Yes.
Okay. So how much of what you've been taught...
And protection. I think for me there's a lot of protection. I've got a wall.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. So, well, then that's the fear piece that you talk about.
Well, correct.
Yeah.
And you kind of have to recognize that they don't exist. They don't. I mean, how much of what you experienced is still occurring?
Yeah. So
it's not existing.
Yeah.
But it has literally changed based on your fears and based on, the addiction of the people that you lived with. Mm-hmm. It conformed you on that web. Yeah. You're not going to leave a certain area, even though that area on the web is traumatizing. Mm-hmm. You're afraid of anything outside of it. That's how people, they're reliving emotionally trauma from childhood. Mm-hmm. Even though it doesn't occur. Yeah. So it's not letting that define who you are. I mean, that's the hardest part, because your sense of self comes from that. Yeah. Because as a child, which you could understand, any child would be defined by trauma. Because they don't know anything. If you were not taught anything other than that, right? How can you find a sense of self outside of that? You would have to start over. You'd have to let go of everything. Try to seek something that is not defined by that. It doesn't have to be much. It can be like, for me, it was like 4 seconds of time when I was like 4 years old. Yeah. Where there was something beautiful and authentic and didn't have fear. Yeah. And can you bring that up? Can you feel that? Yeah. Can you create... Does it still exist, even if it's just one cell of existence? Yeah. You latch onto that, because that can't be conformed. Okay. And then you develop from that place. That's where I say, if you were to die and get reborn to a new body, that feeling of existence that I'm talking about, that's what would get implanted into the new body. Make sense? Mm-hmm. So why would you need to die to let that... If you can find it today, why do you need to leave this body and be put into another one? Right. You could do it today. Yep. You just have to... What that requires is that you never be defined by those experiences. Again, you let them go. Yeah. Into the wind, into some other... Because they don't exist anymore. They can no longer define you. It's like I am about to say, you're starting over today. This is like a brand new way of thinking. Yeah. Hold on to that feeling. What does that feeling like? What does that feeling want to be? What is that feeling? How do you want to live with that? If you could literally start over, if you could wash away all of your past, all of it, and start today, what would be your likes and tastes, and what would be your dreams, and that's really what this is about. Yeah. Isn't it freaking exciting? That's how I felt when I actually realized that. I was like, oh my gosh, I don't have to commit suicide. I don't have to do that. Yeah. I could actually just start right this millisecond. From that. Once you attach to that little feeling, it's like, okay, that is who I am.
That's vulnerable, though.
Hell yeah, it is. It's only vulnerable if you care about other people's rejection. But when do you learn...
The vulnerability for me, though, is the hurt I experienced.
That's what you're still defined by it. You're still saying, well, if I started life over, I would carry all of that with me, because it's so defining. Mm-hmm. That means that all of the persecutor, the real abuser, still is influencing your life. He still has power over you.
Yeah. Well, some of it is my mom, too. I mean, it's
all of it. All of it.
Yeah.
Anybody that you're a victim to. You know, if you were to start over, would you really want to bring that with you?
No.
Well, then why would you want to keep it here right now? You can. It's in your memory. I have a ton of memory.
Yeah.
But why let all of that define everything I do today as if they still have power and control you?
Yeah.
Because if they don't, then none of it truly matters. So the vulnerability part is actually going through that process again and it's detaching from it.
Yeah.
That's where I say you kind of need to go, first of all, you need to attach to the feeling that isn't vulnerable. Oh, crap, this is way too long. I didn't even listen to the timer. Anyways, so...
What time is it?
I'll close this up in about 5 minutes. Okay, so you really need to attach to the soul that doesn't have that defined. Okay. It's not defined by that little piece of existence that you have that is not defined by all that crap.
Yeah.
Start over with that.
Okay.
And you have to just, you have to act as if none of that happened. So in order for you to actually live on the matrix, or on that web, you have to act as if it didn't occur.
Okay.
And it requires the vulnerability to be able to go, if this didn't define me, I wouldn't react this way. So I'm going to let myself feel all of that fear and rejection and literally feel that massive anxiety.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, it's going to have to go away for me to move beyond it.
Yeah.
So the only way to move beyond it is to go through it.
Okay. I've never been able to do that.
Well, you've never really had someone to guide you through it.
No.
So how many people have explained it this way to you?
I've been sitting on the edge of it for a long time. I know it's something I need to do.
Yeah, what you need to do is grab that little girl's hand and say, we're going to go through this together.
Yeah.
And I'm going to, even though it feels the way it does, let's just walk through it anyways. And I'm going to hold your hand through it.
Yeah.
Because that's what you would do with anybody else, right?
Yeah.
If you knew a little girl who's being traumatized the way you were, you would take her and you would say, let's just go through it.
I'll take care of you.
Totally.
Yeah.
But yet... not until you actually do that for yourself.
Yeah.
You're going to be
How do you function.
You're going to be that little girl that's afraid to move. It's almost like I see this. It's like you're in a cave, and there's an opening to get out of the cave. But there's this kind of covering, and that covering, or it's almost like a waterfall. That waterfall. That waterfall feels like trauma. So why would you want to go through that waterfall to get out?
Yeah.
Because that is the most fearful, vicious, awful, nasty feeling.
Yeah.
And what I'm asking you to do is, you're in that cave, and I'm saying you need to take that little feeling you have, that little girl that still exists, and you're going to hold her, and you're going to walk her through that water, out of the cave.
Okay.
And you have no idea what exists outside of the cave. It could be anything. And that's kind of what it feels like. It's like you have to just know, well, staying in the cave is miserable and insane. And so you have to get to the point where that feeling of going through is worth it.
Yeah. Okay.
Because there's got to be something. It's got to be better than what you have inside the cave. Because inside the cave sucks.
Yeah.
So if it's the only risk here, honestly, is that you walk out the cave and it's exactly the same as where you're in.
Right.
That's really it. The risk is that you get what you get. And you already know what that is.
Right.
And it's really not that much of it is a risk because it's miserable. So what do you have to lose?
Yeah.
Because what you're doing is miserable.
Yep.
So let's find out what it feels like to not be miserable.
Yep.
Is there another way of feeling about it? Can you find it's like totally recreating from a totally new place of thought.
Yeah.
And to physically not have the same reactions, because you get physical reactions to fear. Mm-hmm. So, but like I said, in order for you to change the physical reaction to it all, you have to let yourself go through it without judgment and without running away. So you actually gain a relative idea, like feeling. Think of physical training. It's like saying, here, we're going to squat 135 pounds. Well, what if you've never done that before? Well, sometimes you could train up to it, but as soon as you get in there and feel the weight or the pressure on your shoulders, that's the way the body says proprioceptively, here's the information, let's reconnect and engage the muscles and the sarcomeres to be able to create a counterforce. Mm-hmm. That's what I'm asking you to do emotionally.
Yeah.
But because you won't go through it, you have no idea. You don't have a reference point.
Nope.
The only reference point you have is inside the cave.
Yep. Correct.
Did you get that?
Okay,
good.
Oh, yeah, because I've been there for a long time.
Yep, and until you walk through it, until you put yourself under that pressure, you won't have the counter forces.
So is it any one thing? Or so...
For me, it's you have to let go of all of it. When I went through it, to actually go through every single ordeal that was traumatizing to me from the beginning of my life forward, that's the peeling of the onion everybody talks about. You can't even, it seems overwhelming. It's like, really?
Yeah.
That's why I say, let's cut through the onion and start at the core, which is, who are you with nothing? Okay. Find that little girl.
Okay.
Walk through the freaking cave.
Okay.
And it'll just happen. Okay. It just occurs. It doesn't... Anybody who's ever done what I've said would agree.
Okay.
It literally, there's massive shifts, and all of a sudden, none of the trauma truly matters.
Okay.
Because once you get that...
I'd rather do it that way than peel the onion.
Well, you've been peeling the onion. So far, how's that working? I mean, yes, it makes sense. Yes, you understand the trauma, but the actual response and the fear of that trauma, did that really change it? No. The only way to change that is to just stop focusing on all the rest and just go through it intentionally and observe it. If, like I said, if you were going through this massive, that waterfall that I'm telling you about, that traumatizing fear, if you think it's going to crush you, the only way to do it is to just go through it and accept the outcome.
Okay.
That is the submission. That's the bottom.
Okay.
And if you've hit the bottom, where can you go from there?
Yeah.
You start over.
Yeah.
But you need to stay very close to that. I like to think of your soul that existed probably when you were very young before you knew what was going on. Mm-hmm. That you need to hold on to while you go through it. You need to keep a hold of it, keep it calm, keep it safe, and protect it as you go through. Mm-hmm. I don't know how else to explain that.
Yeah. Well, I understand it.
Okay.
So, and I'm trying to pinpoint that time for me.
Yeah, and you kind of need to have a quiet time with yourself to really focus on... There's something very consistent about your soul. Very consistent. And if you were reborn, it would still exist. Mm-hmm. In a different body. In a different place. In a different lifetime. Yeah. It would feel exactly the same.
Okay.
That's the thing you need to really attach to.
Okay.
Because that is something that no one can take from.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah. But I'm wondering, because when I search, it feels like sadness.
Well, that could be if you're judging the...
Okay.
When you think of... That is definitely still being defined by all of that trauma.
Okay. All right.
You need to find something that just feels... There is something that exists, Okay. Try to find something that's not... It cannot be defined by someone else's actions to your body.
Yep.
It can't.
Okay.
It's not defined by someone else's actions with your body, your flesh. Mm-hmm. It isn't flesh. That's really important because it isn't flesh. So what could they do to that?
Right.
Nothing.
Okay.
You need to detach from the flesh. I think that's really, really important. That's what I had to do, was say, okay, if I am not this physical body,
right,
what is the spirit?
Mm-hmm.
And if that spirit exists, it would exist in any body it's put into.
Yep.
Whether it's 500 pounds, whether that body has no legs, whether I'm born with a deficiency, or whether, I never had physical trauma. It still is going to be the same existing spirit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Got it.
You need to find that. Yep. Intentionally seek it. That is, I think, really important. It's not about, as much as I'm saying you really need to get through that passage point without judgment.
Yeah.
You need to find that soul that is not defined by flesh, because that soul can't be touched by anybody else's.
Right.
And it's never been, you've just ignored it. You've ignored it because you've been so defined by that.
Yeah.
By your own physical flesh and by the flesh of other people.
Right.
And that's why, to me, it's like you need to find that and take it through the passageway.
Okay.
Honestly, it feels just like that. That is actually, I'm really impressed by myself right now. Because it truly felt that way if I were to describe that feeling, it was, I attached to that soul and I said, this soul, I'm taking you out of here. And I've been running from this passage because that passage I know is going to crumble me. It's going to literally squish me.
Right.
But you take that soul and you go, but you know what? I'm not sitting here anymore. I'm safe in the cave.
Yeah.
But that means that place controls